Hello, I'm Richard Winfield, and today's webinar is on verifying your ESG credentials. ESG, of course, counts for environmental, social and governance. There's been a big change over the last couple of years, and this has been very much higher profile. But it could be just words, and the purpose of today's webinar is to give you some information about how you can actually create some credentials and accredit yourself against them. So the three things that I'm going to talk about are the Business Roundtable, which was a paper put out in 2019, which really encapsulated the change in thinking that was going on. And then the Good Business Charter is an initiative in the UK, which is a relatively inexpensive self-assessment system. And B Corporation is an international, but started in the US. But this is rather more expensive to do because you get assessment from external. So let's talk about the Business Roundtable. The Business Roundtable is an association of chief executive officers of America's leading companies working to promote a thriving US economy and expanded opportunity for all Americans through sound public policy. And the Business Roundtable statement that we're going to talk about is signed by a large number, and I have been through the list, and they are very senior and high-profile people. Since 1978, the Business Roundtable has periodically issued principles of corporate governance, and the latest statement was issued in August 2019, and this was called The Purpose of a Corporation. The Purpose of a Corporation. Previous statements had endorsed principles of shareholder primacy, but this latest statement superseded previous statements, and it outlined a modern standard for corporate responsibility. Now, for several decades, the responsibility of boards of directors has been perceived as entirely to maximising the benefit for the shareholders. This goes back to Milton Friedman in the Chicago School. And this particular statement was seen really as a major step forward in challenging the original approach. It was signed by a gallery of 181 American business leaders, and as I said, they are very senior people. And here is a statement, and the statement is basically a set of statements. Delivering value to our customers. We will further the tradition of American companies leading the way in meeting or exceeding customer expectations. Investing in employees. This starts with compensating them fairly and providing important benefits. It also includes supporting them through training and education that helps develop new skills for a rapidly changing world. We foster diversity and inclusion, dignity and respect. Now, just looking at these sets of words I've said so far, they are very nice, good, warm feelings, but they're not specific in any way. So just to bear that in mind. Dealing fairly and ethically with our suppliers. We are dedicated to serving as good partners to other companies, large and small, that help us meet our missions. Supporting the communities in which we work. We respect the people in our communities and protect the environment by embracing sustainable practices across our businesses. So this is actually stating something about a slightly wider view than just looking after shareholders. But continuing to generate long-term value for shareholders who provide the capital that allows companies to invest, grow and innovate. We are committed to transparency and effective engagement with shareholders. So it's not just to make the most money for them, but it's actually to make sure that they are engaged and know what's going on. And they do say at the end, each of our stakeholders is essential. All of the statements that come before are essential. We commit to deliver value to all of them for the future success of our companies, our communities and our country. But let's see what happened. This was in 2019, and I'm talking now just about 2 years later in 2021. Almost every public company and many a private company has sought to fortify its reputation by making statements of commitment to environmental stewardship, social justice and responsible governance. So as I said at the beginning, it's become very much more high profile, and companies have responded on the basis that they really need to make some of these positive statements. But a Willis Towers Watson survey of corporate leaders found growing concern that reputational risks could result in potentially crippling business outcomes. Now, let me just link this to what it's about, and we'll see in a moment. What they're saying is, it's all very well saying you're going to be one of the great and the good, and you're going to have all these good practices. But when you've said it, people will expect you to achieve it. And the challenge that they're bringing out in this survey is that people have said these nice words and not necessarily done anything about them. And that's caused problems which can challenge a company's reputation. So look at this. Many chief executives signed up to the pledge without consulting the board. Shall I say that again? Many chief executives signed up to the pledge without consulting the board, and this is a significant change in direction, let alone putting in place the operational and governance oversight systems necessary to achieve their stated goals. And here's a statement from an SEC commissioner about this trend for ESG. I don't think this person's very impressed. The ESG trend, labelling based on incomplete information, public shaming and shunning, wrapped in moral rhetoric, preached with cold-hearted, self-righteous oblivion to the consequences, which ultimately fall on real people. So, I don't think he was very impressed with this trend. So, what PwC said is that everything from carbon emissions and racial and gender balance to the sustainability of sourcing strategies is now under the microscope. So these things which once upon were nice things to talk about are now being examined. Now, what did McKinsey say? Companies that have thought of ESG as more of a marketing and communications issue are now witnessing firsthand how non-financial risks can significantly affect corporate valuations. So the ESG considerations are becoming very significant, even to the extent of affecting valuations. So companies need to create new processes for understanding and managing reputation risk associated with ESG, and recognize it as an essential enterprise-wide exercise. So, CEOs, chief executives who signed the Business Roundtable pledge 2 years ago and who are promoting their company's ESG goals have set expectation very high. And that hype has now become reputation risk. And that statement has come from Nir Kozovsky, and what he's saying here is they need to make it real or walk it back. If they can't keep their promises and live up to expectations, then their stakeholders will make them and the board members pay a high price. So, it comes to the crux of our webinar today. How do you verify your ESG credentials? What gets measured gets done. So what are the things that we can identify that can actually get measured? So let's start off with the Good Business Charter. As I say, the Good Business Charter is a UK initiative. It is a self-appraisal, but it is detailed, and I'll show you now in what ways. The Good Business Charter is a simple accreditation which organisations in the United Kingdom can sign up to in recognition of responsible business practices. The Good Business Charter is an initiative of the Good Business Foundation, a UK registered charity founded in 2019 and supported by the CBI and the TUC. They're both represented on the advisory group. The Charter was launched in February 2020, and in January 2021 the Federation of Small Businesses collaborated on a streamlined version of the Charter for organisations with up to 50 employees. So just like some of the developments with corporate governance codes, there's a slightly different variation for smaller companies. Founder members include Capita, Deloitte, Brompton Bicycles, Richer Sounds and London City Airport. Self-certification can be done online by answering the following 10 questions. Now, as I go through these, just think about these questions and compare them with the statements that were in the Business Roundtable. Now, the Business Roundtable had an impact, a tremendous impact, but it didn't resolve the situation of actually how to deal with it. So here are the 10 questions. Living wage. Do you, not simple, quite simple, do you pay your directly employed and regularly contracted staff the real living wage as defined by the Living Wage Foundation? Or do you have plans to work toward that goal? And it refers here to the Living Wage Foundation. At the end, where I'll mention a couple of others. This is not just something that's put out. It's something that is done in conjunction with established accreditation organisations. Fairer hours and contracts. Do you only offer or use 0 or minimal hours contracts when it is mutually beneficial and accepted by both you and the employee? Yes or no? Employee well-being. Do you actively support and encourage employee well-being, treating those with legitimate sickness in a fair and respectful manner? And do you promote access to impartial support and advice for employees with physical and mental health needs? And this can include in signposting to NHS services or charities. Employee representation. Is there a way where every employee can make suggestions or raise issues with senior management? And if you recognise a trade union, do you commit to regular engagement? Again, these are yes/no questions. Diversity and inclusion. Do you put robust measures in place to encourage diversity at key stages of recruitment, selection and retention of employees? And have you put in place robust measures to prevent harassment or victimisation in the workplace, with access to independent third-party support if necessary? Environmental responsibility. Do you encourage the development of good environmental and net zero practice as an organisation and by your employees, suppliers and customers, seeking to minimise your impact and commit to improve it, depending on the size, sector and relevance of your organisation? Fair tax. Do you commit to pay your taxes where applicable and only use tax allowances for the purposes intended? And are you transparent in your relationship with HMRC? And in the UK, HMRC is the tax authorities, providing all relevant information. And do you cooperate in resolving any disputes? Commitment to customers. Do you have a clear commitment to customers and prioritise addressing and learning from customer feedback, seeking to put negative issues right? Ethical sourcing. Do you commit to ethical sourcing of anything you purchase, such as by applying standards set out in the Ethical Trading Initiative base code where relevant? So again, they refer to external and established quality standards. And prompt payment. Are you committed to paying your suppliers promptly and within at least 30 days? I think they should be saying, and within a maximum of 30 days. The GBC, the Good Business Charter, has partnered with the Living Wage Foundation, the Ethical Trading Initiative and the Prompt Payment Code, amongst others, as part of its accreditation process. So I've mentioned that several times. Self-certification. This is how you go about it. You register and complete the process online. So it's quite straightforward to do, but the questions are specific. Now, the Certified B Corporation. The Certified B Corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. B Corp certification is administered by standards analysts at the non-profit B Lab. Standards analysts are located at B Lab's Pennsylvania, New York and Amsterdam offices. So that means at least that they are based in the US and in Europe. The standards for B Corp certification are overseen by B Lab's Independent Standards Advisory Council. So I've given you some background information. I don't know to what extent that's relevant to you, but what is more important is to know about what it does. So the values and aspirations of the B Corp community are embedded in the B Corp Declaration of Independence. And this is the B Corp Declaration of Independence. We envisage a global economy that uses business as a force for good. This economy is comprised of a new type of corporation, the B Corporation, which is purpose-driven and creates benefit for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. As B corporations and leaders of this emerging economy, we believe that we must be the change we seek in the world. Goes back to Mr. Gandhi. That all business ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered. And to do so requires that we act with the understanding that we are each dependent upon one another and thus responsible for each other and future generations. So you might think this is another set of nice words, but there's more to come. Through their products, practices and profits, businesses should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. Now, meeting the legal requirement. Certified B corporations are legally required to consider the impact of their decisions on all their stakeholders as part of their terms of certification. So there's no question when a decision is made, or before a decision is made, the board at least must take account of the interests of all stakeholders. And this must be formalised, so it must be part of the agenda. The B Corp legal framework helps companies protect their mission through capital raises and leadership changes. And it gives entrepreneurs and directors more flexibility when evaluating potential sale and liquidity options. So the significance about this is if you change your charter, whatever that might be in your case, so that this is written into it, then whether the management or the board or even the ownership changes, then the requirement carries on with the company. So it's a protection, particularly if you're an organisation which has reached a stage where you want to sell up to a larger organisation and want to protect the values that have been essential to the development of the organisation. So the legal requirement gives legal protection to directors and officers to consider the interests of all stakeholders, not just shareholders, when making decisions. So if they are challenged, they can go back to this legal protection and say, well, look, we are required to take account of the interests of all stakeholders. And it creates additional rights for shareholders to hold directors and officers accountable to consider these interests. So it works the other way around, that externally people can say, have you taken account properly? And it limits these expanded rights to shareholders exclusively. So although it's expanding the decision-making process to cover all stakeholders, it's only the shareholders actually who can challenge. B Corp certification assesses the overall positive impact of the company that stands behind it. Certified B corporations achieve a minimum verified score on the B Impact Assessment, a rigorous assessment of a company's impact on its workers, customers, community and environment. And then they make their B Impact report transparent on the bcorporation.net website. Now, I'll come back to this at the end to give you a specific information, but the point is the minimum verified score is not very high. So this is not something where you sort of pass or fail. It can be seen much more as a journey of improvement. Certified B corporations also amend their legal governing documents to require their board of directors to balance profit and purpose. A combination of third-party validation, public transparency and legal accountability help certified B corporations to build trust and value. Now, how do you go about it? So firstly, you submit your B Impact assessment, just like in the previous case with the Good Business Charter. But it goes on rather more than that. Your next thing is, and this is why it costs rather more, is you schedule an assessment review and you submit your initial documentation. You then complete an assessment review, and this is a face-to-face or an inter-person review. You might have to submit additional documentation, and then background checks will be done by the B-Lab staff. So this is a proper external accreditation. And every year, 10% of recertifying certified B corporations are selected for an in-depth site review. Now, recertification, as we see in a moment, is once every 3 years. So here we are, recertification. A company must update their assessment every 3 years. They must provide additional documentation to verify their answers, and they must achieve at least 80 out of 200 available points. So as I say, it's not that the standard is low, it's that the standard is designed such that you can improve year on year. Public transparency. All certified B corporations share their B Impact report publicly on the bcorporation.net website. The B Impact report is the summary of a company's scores on the B Impact assessment by category, but it contains no question level information, so you're not having to put yourself up to risk commercial information. So that's me. That's the summary. I'm Richard Winfield. You can contact me anytime at rwinfield@brevigroup.co.uk, or you can visit my website at richardwinfield.com. Thank you very much.